Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me here tonight. And it's great to see such a mix of crowd, actually. Really, really lovely to be speaking here. And thank you to Kabula. So what could I possibly tell you who are working with data and tech and have been working for so long? So I'm a lawyer, right? We don't know much about that. Well, my background is I, last century, worked at UK government. We worked in the ICT team at the Department for Trade. I did something called the 3G license auction, which I've been heckled and commended for, but that dates me as well. And then I spent a while in DC, Washington, DC, working on things around telcos greatly expanding with convergence. And there was a small company called SBC, and it's now AT&T Inc. And I did the analysis around that and what that looked like internationally. And then something happened around 2008. And it's something up in the air, apparently, but it's called cloud. And that sort of transformed things, and you all know that, right? But that's how my career is, and I've always been working in the space. Now, more recently, two things have happened. I suppose the real thing of significance around that is my background is in telco. And why is that relevant to AI? Well, telco was a monopoly. It was owned by the government, and it was heavily regulated. And around the early 2000s, the decision was made that actually these IT companies, these boxes, these CDs, we don't need to worry about that. They'll never replace the telcos, right? How could we replace a phone? There we go. And so we didn't regulate them. We didn't really envisage social media. We sort of thought in 3G they'd be able to serve vouchers on your phone as you walk past. But at the same time, the batteries for the phones had to be housed in white vans. So that was the delay, and there we go. But the reason that this is relevant with telco is because it's an infrastructure. And so in 2017, 2018, AI was sort of being spoken about in some of my circles. And my belief is that lots of the principles around the regulation of telcos, telecom companies, could apply for AI, because a lot of it is around standards, actually, and that many of the issues which meant that our phone, and I'm sorry but I am old, the phone that worked that worked in Europe and the UK, and you had to have another phone that worked in the US, or you had to buy the phone that had the 1900 capabilities. I can see Russ, he's there with me. Like, we sorted it out, we got the standards and we addressed it. And so I was speaking to an MP who I know very well, and who was actually, I'd worked with previously as a tech lawyer. And I was saying this to him. I was like, this is maths, but AI is maths, but we have to start putting in place a way of governing AI, because actually, this is just going to let rip. And lots of these issues we worked through. And so that was how the Institute of AI was formulated. And the other thing I've done in my background is around 2017, 2018, I was busy. We sold a law firm, actually that was 2020, but we sold a law firm to a Big Four. So I was one of the partners that did that, and we sold some tech. We won the FT Innovation Award, so I've got some views on how law tech works or it doesn't work, and data, but it was also AI enabled as well. So this is where I come from in sort of speaking to you. And what I've done since working at the Institute of AI, which is I've been very privileged in building a network of over 30 countries, which is more than the AI Safety Summit in the UK had in November, but that bring legislators together to consider how we might regulate or what we might need to do, and have those conversations around it. And that's also meant that we now work with UNESCO. What people, or not many people, are aware, and forgive me if people are abundantly aware of it, but UNESCO have a document called the Recommendation on AI and Ethics, and 194 countries have signed it, including the US, China, and the UK. But it never really gets focused on here. But recently, I was in Slovenia at a UN event speaking, and both the US AI Special Advisor and the Chinese Deputy Education Minister were on a panel saying that they were going to follow the recommendation. Now, unfortunately, the UK person was ill, and so was the deputy, so we didn't appear on the panel. But this is where, but what I also heard, because the EU Commission was speaking, they all said, we support the recommendation, and we all want to export our AI governance regime. What does that mean? Surely that's 5 years ago when we were all talking about standards. But so this is where we are around, and what do we mean by governance? What does that actually mean? Now, lawyers love governance, right? That's our terms. But what does it mean? Well, actually, when we talk about it to clients, what we mean is around the transparency and the ability. In lots of ways, you've already done the analysis when you've done that GDPR thing. It's around the transparency, the explainability, the analysis, and also bias. Everyone throws, I don't know whether anyone's seen the Google Gemini piece of bias going the opposite way. Someone's nodding. So characters that the images are being generated, so people of color being presented as Nazis, and this is where the bias has gone wrong, and that's just recently out, I think in the last 24 hours. So there are risks, and for those on Twitter, one of my posts is in 2019, I put my picture through a tool that predicts your jobs, and I was an air stewardess. Yay. Which is fine, but it's not really what I paid for my law school for. So there are massive issues around that, which we're all contending. Now, so what does that mean? What does that actually mean around where we are? And I think a couple of things that are happening that are really significant, and you know this, it's the data centers and it's the compute power that and it's also the chips. And because I'm an infrastructure geek, that's just back to old school infrastructure. That's back to copper wires. So we talk about AI and cloud, which is this like magic thing in the air, but actually we end up going right back to physical infrastructure. And there is the play that's going on at a geopolitical level around the control of the chips. You'll see that with what the US is doing. But so it's both the control of the chips, and then also you've got the data localization rules. So when you're working with Kabula and you're getting your data all sorted, what does that look like? Where is it stored? Which AWS option you've got? I was doing a deal recently for a fintech against a bank, and the bank wanted to talk to us about, well, what are you going to do if AWS goes down? And I was exactly the same thing you do, wait on the helpline, behind the UK government and the US government. But what we are doing is making ourselves more and more resilient, dependent on single points of failure around that, potentially. So I think what I wanted to just give you I'm kind of a speed through is the different things that are coming through. And I don't know how much of this will be news to you or not. So my position is that actually we do need regulation in this space, that we have the GDPR, but the GDPR only covers personal data. And I've been working with clients on monetizing platforms for 10 plus years. The clever stuff is on the aggregated data, the analysis you can draw, the inferences you can draw. So it does seem that there's a void around that. But also we've got examples of times when AI tools have been used that have stopped someone from getting something that they want. And then how can we address that? How can we seek redress? And how can we enforce our rights? Now, from where I look at it, the key is it gets said a lot. Rubbish in, rubbish out. We say that. But I'm amazed by the number of clients I come across who don't really know where their data is or their provenance of their data, or what the history is behind it, or what they might want to do it, or where is it stored, et cetera, et cetera. And how you actually unlock that seems to be coming through more and more. But more importantly, if we look at the legislation that's coming in so the US referred to their executive order. We've got the EU AI Act. Everyone's heard of the EU AI Act, surely, where they're imposing a very significant set of regulations on AI systems, wholesale piece. These questions are going to be asked more and more. Where's your kind of registry of AI assets that you're using? Now, I'm happy to talk about copyright and creation of LLMs at the break, but it's a whole topic in itself. And I'm working with creatives around that but that's a different topic. How have the LLMs built their machines, their AI? What I would say is, from my perspective, and obviously I don't act for an LLM, is it feels a bit like a David and Goliath piece. You've got the likes of some of the big tech companies saying, there's nothing to see here, we haven't stolen anything, we haven't infringed anything, but we can't tell you because it's proprietary. And it's really hard to find creatives who might have the money, really, to be able to contest that. But I'm not going there. What I will say, though, is in my experience, it is preventing wider adoption of AI. Now, it might just be that I'm risk averse, but the terms of the different AI tools are changing forever, really quickly. We're getting is your data going into the big machine, or is it staying in a closed loop? All of those questions, lots of clients are working through with us, but it's constantly changing. But the other thing is, what are you then looking to do with the output? And what's the risk? Because if you're selling it on and you're giving someone a clear kind of, this is yours, then that's far harder to do with an LLM. So in the UK, we're a bit of we don't really know what we're doing with AI. I could just ended that statement there. But so we've issued our white paper. We want to take a sector-specific approach. We support the G7. We want to focus on AI safety, and we want to focus on these big foundation models. What was really interesting is I'm not hearing those same conversations going on at an international level, that actually there is a focus on the here and now and the AI that's being deployed here and now, rather than the AI that's going to destroy the world in 20 years. And I think, I'm not a technology expert in that. I've kind of played with and configured AI tools, but I'm not the maths genius, and so I don't know where I come out on that. And obviously, people who are going public are speaking from different positions and different interests. But I do think there's a risk on the here and now, and I think there's a risk for a company on a brand around data that's being used and how data is being accessed and stored, and then also the decisions that are the kind of the output and the decisions and the business decisions that are being made for that and what you're selling as an output. So that's sort of where we are in the UK. We've done a bit of an analysis. Trust is quite big here. We want to be able to trust products. And I do think there is a real issue around deepfakes. And you'll see that there are initiatives coming in around imagery and how we kind of can authenticate the imagery. And I think, considering the number of elections that are going to be going on this year, it's going to be massive, and it'll be really interesting to see whether that will come in. I don't think the Online Safety Act properly will address it, and considering it took 8 years for us to get on the online safety, which is the kind of content moderation piece and protecting people online, I don't have very high hopes for it. If Labour get in, I think we will see and they've said this, a stronger regulatory approach. At the moment, we've got the regulators sort of making an assessment about, I think it was about 9 months ago when they issued their white paper, I'm quoted as saying, but they haven't actually given the regulators any capacity or money to be able to even do an analysis of kind of AI, and you're basically fighting against tech companies on this. So it's sort of like an umbrella in a tsunami. They seem to be equipping their regulators more, but money's short. But I still think we are focused on unlocking the industrial potential, which is very much where the rest of the world was 5 years ago, but that's not some of the conversations I was hearing. And there was a great because a couple of weeks ago I was in Slovenia at this ministerial meeting, and there were lots of African countries who were very concerned. They were also very concerned that their infrastructure just isn't there. So what do I think the future brings? I think we will end up more regulated here. I think, and actually the EU is very much intending that its AI Act is a bit like GDPR and sets the global standard. I think what's really interesting is the investment in the French LLM, Merkel is it? I don't know whether anyone's seen that Microsoft has put in. People are interested. It's Kai Zenner, who works at Axel Voss, who was one of the MEPs leading this. He's come out quite publicly and said, but we were holding off with our regulation of the LLMs to be able to compete with the US. This is not part of the plan, that would then be one of the big European kind of LLM competitors would be acquired by a US LLM. Now, what do we care, right? We're in the UK. Well, ultimately, we're incredibly connected, and I think we're at a juncture of whether we end up with a balkanization or a kind of breaking up of the internet and the systems that sit on top of it. You'd have China, you'd have Europe, US, and the rest of the world, so into 4, or whether one AI governance system will pervade. And obviously, the US is likely to be, for us, the US system. So we might be less regulated, but I think if we can start, like my advice to clients is, you start looking at your data, you start doing, it's the GDPR without the personal data analysis, but also so that if you are ever required to justify how you're doing something or how you've unlocked something, you've got the homework to do it. That's my summary. Thank you. And 2 minutes left. Any questions or questions later?
Hi, Emma. That was really, really interesting to hear about infrastructure meets geopolitics. My question is, do you think, sticking on a line of geopolitics and infrastructure, that we might be ending up in a bit of an arms race again, with companies like SoftBank in Japan putting forward 30 billion and trying to tie up with the Middle East to combat NVIDIA and create a new NPU infrastructure? Absolutely, yeah, without doubt. This is the next race that we're going to. I think there's an interesting point about how AI enables cyber and cyber attacks, which is the next line of kind of attack from that perspective. But without doubt, it goes back to the infrastructure. When I was, there's a really good book called Material World, which talks about the 6 kind of base products that you need, sand being one of them, and talks about the resources that Chile has. The Chilean digital minister was there a couple of weeks ago, and I said to her, hey, what's going on with have you got a big VC scene in kind of clean tech? She said, no, not at all, because the VCs apparently think that it's going to move on. But people are seeing the base products and then gearing up the tools, and they're realizing that actually the physical infrastructure we're really going to go down to the wire on it. I do think my position is that AI is a type of infrastructure. It will move us in a way that we're just not aware of.
And I think data becomes key. We all know that, right? From the data that's been amassed about us by the tech companies, that's how they've got a foothold. But yeah, I do, for sure. Thank you. I've got 32 seconds. Yeah.
Hi, I would like to ask from the regulatory point of view, wouldn't it be easier to skip few steps and consider AI as an employee? As an employee, with the liabilities for the company and everything that comes with that.
So, is this question around whether AI is a person in itself, or is it the agent?
No, it's about if AI screws up, company is liable. If employee screws up, company is liable.
So that's where we are. I think the problem is that there's a lot of snake oil on them, and I can say this because I've bought the tech. There's a lot of snake oil on the market. Things that I've been told, I built a tool for Brexit analysis of contracts. I was told I need 30 examples. I was naive. I needed 1,450. You know, this was 2017. This is where we are with it. And actually, there is a dangerous conversation going on around AI being all really complex. No, it's maths. If I go and plug my hairdryer in when I'm traveling, I expect not to be electrocuted, actually. We have that. If you go into an office block, you put employees in there, you don't expect any of them to be electrocuted. This is, there's been talk of whether we take the FDA method or whether we're simplifying things by the electricity analogy. But this can be harmful, and it's going to have mass deployment. So I think I'm agreeing with you. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Emma.